Hi, Sharon. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I would love to hear your story, and I'm sure our listeners will too. Can you please start us with a little bit of your backstory? Maybe what led you into the coaching career that you have today? Because you do have quite the
Mm.
story.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey arriving here. My background is actually in education, so I was in education for 16 years, and for 10 of those, I was an assistant principal, and which is, I guess, just for explanation purposes, is sort of like a grade supervisor is probably the best way to explain that.
Hmm.
And then um, and then my final 2 years was as a deputy principal, so I was a second in charge of a pretty big school, a primary school, so about 600 kids, and that was a big job. And then I made a complete life flip, and on my 38th birthday, I did my last day of teaching, and that was the day that I said goodbye to the school that I'd been at for 12 years, and went and sold my home in Sydney. I'm from Sydney originally, and moved my family into a caravan, which is, I guess you'd say, like a camper, like towed
Yeah,
behind the
camper
back
and
of the car.
RV. Yeah.
Yeah, and traveled Australia, and then I was coming back along what's called the Nullarbor Plain, and it's the road that goes all the way along the bottom of Australia, and it's
Mhm.
dead flat and it's dead straight, and there's not a lot to look at. And I looked at my husband and I said, I think I've done my last day of education. I'd really like to go into something in sales and marketing. I'd always been really I'd always been really fascinated, particularly as a deputy principal. I saw the energetics, or experienced the energetics, of branding,
Mm.
and what having, those standards of, a great social media presence and a great website and those comms. I saw what that did for the whole community, and so I thought, you know what, I'm going to look at doing this somehow as a career. So I wanted to work in the digital space, and I didn't want to go back to train or anything like that. So I just started my own business, and I did a whole range of things, from affiliate marketing to network marketing to product sales to online services, creating websites, to helping people with their social media, and along the way invested really highly in myself in personal development. And that had been something that I'd sort of done unofficially, but I just got more intentional about my own personal development. And then I was like, this is actually what I'm doing. I'm actually coaching. And so it was 12 months ago now. It's when at the time of recording this, it's actually Coaching Week, International Coaching Week.
Mhm.
And it was exactly 12 months ago that I actually came out of the coaching closet. But in reality, I've been coaching for a couple of years. But it just took a while for me to sort of own that hat. But I'm so glad that I did. And coaching is by far the best work that I've ever done.
Mm.
I feel like it's really a calling. It's so much more than a profession. It's a calling.
Yeah, I think when you have a background in education too, you can find that link to
Mm.
coaching. I also have a background in education, 20 years as a teacher and university educator, and I've done some supervisory work as well. But I find it so interesting that you were able to see branding in your career as a deputy
Oh.
vice principal. Oh my goodness, I
I mean,
never
we wear
noticed it.
uniforms here too.
Yeah,
We wear school uniforms, and so there was probably a bit of a whole kind of image thing.
yeah.
But gee, it was interesting, and this is why I'm so passionate about branding, because you know branding in business, because some people just think it's just aesthetics, it's just
Yeah.
surface level, but actually it's not aesthetics, it's energetics, and it
Hmm.
does have people lean in, it does raise the bar, And, there's something really powerful about, claiming your identity. And
Yeah.
when a good brand is steeped in your purpose and your mission and your values, it's just a really beautiful thing. And I learned that in schools. I learned that, in my role as a deputy, being in that position where I could see across the whole school community and experiencing that in that way. And yeah, I just loved it.
Yeah, it's so true. I can actually see that now as you were talking about it. I was looking back to my own experience and I thought, I just wasn't in the headspace to look at branding at that point because I hadn't really quite ventured into owning my own business yet. But of course,
Mm,
once I did, I had a quick class in what branding was. Took me a few years, but finally got
yeah.
there. Yeah, it really is. It's about your message. And as you said, your mission. It's the energy
Mm,
that you put out there. It's all of those things. It's not just colors and things, right? In your website.
yeah. Yeah, it's
So
so much more than skin deep.
it is. So you mentioned that you started off with owning several businesses, and I think we've all kind of been
Mm,
there. When we do start a business, not everything works right away. And I just say
uh-huh.
works, meaning it's not the thing we necessarily settle into or find our purpose
Mm.
with. Can you tell us just about maybe your favorite business that you had started and the one that you liked the least?
Um, yeah, look, when I first started, um, I have to be honest, I got so much out of network marketing.
Mm,
I really believe in it as a model, when it's done well. And I was incredibly fortunate to be aligned with Richard Blissbrook, who is an internationally renowned. Yeah, so working with Richard Blissbrook was just such a revelation for me personally. But the thing is, I had a physical product business. I was also selling inflatable stand-up paddleboards at the time. And
oh,
so I started both of those businesses at the same time. And, in comparison, I was managing all the inventory and, doing the orders and going
mm,
to, trade shows and big setups. And, it was huge.
uh,
It's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, but it certainly was far from easy. um Neither was network marketing for that matter, but it was the fact that you got to work with other people, you got to network within the business. There was that sort of almost collegial support, but not.
mm,
But probably the most valuable thing was the personal development that I got through that, because I was changing. I wasn't the same person. But certainly, along the way, just experiencing all of those things was so worth it. And you're right, like it's a case of, sort of like what takes off. So I had a lot of
yeah,
lines in
yeah.
the water to see. I'd never been an entrepreneur before. I neither had my family or friends really. Most of the people who I associated with were all employees. And so, I had to learn. I had to hit the ground and learn fast. But it was a great initiation into really stepping into that entrepreneurial space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn in network marketing. It is kind of an education in and of itself in many ways. So all of these
Yeah.
things, I think that we bring a little of each of them to what we're doing currently. It's never any wasted
Mm,
time or a wasted business or anything like that, because, with the education, really everything that I have done leading me up to where I am now, I can see bits and pieces of all of those things. So it's all
definitely.
valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. And the things that didn't work, I just still even learnt so much out of those experiences that they help me now.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your life as a deputy principal, just because I have
Mm,
that curiosity as well, and we have that kind of in common a bit. Um,
mm,
I talked to a lot of women, and a common theme that comes up is burnout. So,
mm.
you mentioned that you did this flip, but was it related to burnout? Was it a need to spend more time with your family? What would you say was the cause of the change?
Oh, definitely. It was definitely that. The other thing is I think, I'd seen the decline of the status of educators,
Mm,
in society.
mhm.
I'd seen the incredible increase in workload, particularly over the 5 years leading up to my leaving. The workload had just increased like exponentially. Particularly the administrative type tasks, we were getting less support for children in the classroom, less administrative support. So, where we used to get our photocopying done or, get help with laminating or have, an assistant in the classroom, that was all taken away. And I actually, I had concerns even about the generation of parents
Mm,
because, I really realized I saw things that made me realize that we were like lambs to the slaughter out there. That, you could have some parent make some wild claim
it's
and,
true.
it was like little Johnny was perfect and everybody had to, kind of toe the line. And I just thought, this is not right.
Mhm.
I felt like, I worked for the state government as a public school teacher, and I just didn't even feel like they had my back. I'd
Yeah.
seen things and I thought I just didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want the red tape anymore. The other thing is I was young enough to retrain. I knew that I could have a complete new career if I left when I did, and at some point, reach back to that level of income that I was at. So, you
Yeah.
know it just seemed like the right time. I was also leaving the area where I was, so moving to an area where it was, cheaper housing, and so I was sort of, for lack of a better expression, cashed up enough that I could take an extended break and just ponder what I wanted to do, spend some money starting a business, and just, be willing to lose, I guess.
Yeah, it was nice that you had that space to do that. I actually did
Mm,
have that as well through just a set of weird circumstances when I was working for my university. And something that I experienced, and I feel like a lot of women this will resonate with them. I applaud you for taking that step and making the move, because I know it's not easy, even having been given the space to think about it. And I'll tell you the two
yeah.
reasons it was difficult for me. One was kind of this label I think I had put on myself, or allowed everyone else to put on me, as this kind of overachiever, successful person. Was I willing to give that up? And who really was I without that? And the other
Mm,
part was my own fear of failure. Did I see this as a failure, as a step down, as something along
mm,
those lines? And it took me a little while to fully let go of that university life, as far as even,
mm.
leaving my office there for like 2 years with people just in
Yeah.
and out using it and all of my stuff in there still. And it was just crazy. Do you relate to those two fears, I guess, as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the plus sides for me is that I left that community. So, I wasn't still in that same
Hmm.
community. I didn't live there anymore. And I was almost able to make this complete chop. But I really do think that a lot of people, a lot of former colleagues definitely probably thought I'd gone mad when,
Yeah.
I'd joined network marketing and I'd moved, and, and yet there was also that element where the ones who got it, they were just like, oh, I want to go.
Yes,
They
yes.
really admired, that bravery. But, I was very fortunate. I think it does help for anyone who's looking to get out of, teaching or maybe nursing or something that they're sort of in at the moment. It does help to have that little bit of money behind you,
Yes.
because often we find that we're financed to the level of earnings, and so it is harder to make those pivots. But
Yeah.
it's so worth it. You know, there's no
Yeah.
looking back.
I agree. You can't go back, I think, once you've experienced the
No.
freedom that you do. And it isn't easy. I don't think, the transition is not easy. There are a lot of stepping
No.
stones and challenges, but it certainly is worth
Yeah,
it. So
definitely.
let's talk about caravan life, because that's what I'm really
Yeah.
here for. I'm just kidding, but I really do want to know about that. I just want to live vicariously through your stories with that.
Yeah.
But you had 5 children that you put into.
3. There were
3.
5 of us all
Oh,
together.
5 of us.
Yes,
Okay, that's a
there
little
were
bit
5 of
better. I
us.
was thinking 5 kids. Okay, 5 of
Yeah,
you,
but
but
we've
still,
met
I'm a
families on the
family of
road.
5. Yeah.
Yeah, we met a family that had 7 children, and they lived in a bus and
Yeah.
traveled Australia. So, you know, it's
Amazing.
quite common.
So tell me
Yeah.
about it. What did you do? Where did you
Yeah.
go?
Mm,
And financing it, all of the questions
mm.
that we'd love to hear about.
Yeah, so we had been caravanners for quite a long time when we decided to do this. So the plan was always to travel Australia, and you know, we purchased our 4th caravan to do this. We have a Toyota Land Cruiser, which is a big 4-wheel drive. You know, they're pretty
Yeah.
popular here in the, you know, in Australia, particularly more so in the outback. And yeah, we had aspirations to do that. As I say, we'd been caravanning a long time, and all of a sudden the stars just aligned. You know, we put it out there and said, you know, this is what we want to do. And then we could just see suddenly a way that we could make it happen, and that was really to sell our home in Sydney and leave Sydney. And I mean, look, where we live now is 300 meters to the beach. We live in our most favorite part of Australia,
Wonderful.
about 7 hours north of Sydney, in a place called Coffs Harbour, the home of the big banana for your listeners. But you know, we traveled right around the outskirts of Australia and up and down the middle. You know, pretty wild. You know, I'm sure that people know, you know, the sort of place that Australia is. It's pretty wild. You know, crocodiles and lots of snakes and spiders and
Right.
you know, all the things, lots of sharks. But you know, we just chased waterfalls and you know, saw just the most amazing things. And you know, it sort of hasn't been until the pandemic that people have actually really become woke in Australia to how amazing our own country is, which is great, because so many people would be like, oh no, not holidaying in Australia. Oh, you know, we'll just go overseas.
Yeah.
But there's now finally this movement towards, you know, actually it's a really great place. And I'm so glad that we got to do it before, you know, before COVID. We were very lucky. You know, even the cost of what it would be now
Can
to
you
travel in
imagine
that
with
Land
gas?
Cruiser. I
Yeah.
mean, as it was, like equivalent, it'd be hard to explain, but right in the center of Australia at a place called Kings Canyon, which is near Uluru,
Hmm.
the big monolith that's right in the middle of Australia, not too far from there. You know, I can remember, this is 2017, paying like, you know, $2.50 a litre Australian for fuel, so for
Hmm.
diesel. But it was just, you know, it was just a great experience. You know, we had the 5 of us in a 23-foot caravan, and it was just, every day was adventure. You know, we would, every day we'd wake up and we'd look out the caravan window and we would have an amazing view every single morning. You know, it was a life of adventure. So we loved it. But
Yeah.
I will also say it was also very nice to pull up stumps.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know, to have that space and, you know, a little bit of privacy away from the kids and
Of course.
space for the kids. It was great, but it was fantastic while it lasted. And we lived in the van for 2 years.
Oh my
We
goodness.
traveled, and yeah, we did 2 months short of 2 full years. So
Hmm.
the second part of that, our eldest child started high school, and because it was a new area, we wanted to sort of have some stability. So we parked not far from where I am here and sort of looped back, you know, so we'd go on holidays and then we'd come back so she
Oh,
could do some
okay. Okay.
schooling, and then we'd loop and come back. And so
Nice.
we did that for about a year. But oh, look, anyone wanting to do it, just do it. You know, I'd love to do the same in the USA one day.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is a good place to do that. And a lot of people are doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this all led you into coaching women in business in
Mm.
certain areas. So can you tell us about your coaching now, what you're doing, what your passion
Yeah.
is?
So I mentioned that I was selling the inflatable stand-up paddle boards, and as fate should have it, that company ended up asking me in right at the beginning of 2019 to work for them,
Hmm.
because they were seeing that, I was selling lots of boards for, my little startup business that I was taking around to caravan shows. Actually,
Okay.
that was, sort of like trade shows.
Hmm.
I was, because I knew it was just such a great lifestyle product. I was still in the van, so I started my business from my caravan, and yeah, they asked me to work for them. So that kind of cemented me in sales and marketing, and it really boosted what I already knew. I mean, when we were traveling, we had created a blog, so we already had a digital footprint, and I'd grown that brand. So I knew quite a bit about, growing online and creating a brand, all of those things. And then when I sort of moved into the coaching space, I was just finding a lot of people were always asking me about social media, about branding. um, they were asking me a lot about strategy, but I was also, a bit on the woo side as well. So, sort of had that personal development and the strategy side of
Yeah.
things. And, for a long time, I felt really quite fraudy, saying that I was a business coach. I thought, oh, I can't come out of the closet as that. But in reality, that's what I was doing. And it's very much just, I don't know, like I can't even explain how I arrived there. But I work with women who are starting coaching businesses, healing businesses, or consultants, and they're usually consultants in the pregnancy, birthing, parenting, matrescence
Hmm.
space. So I work with those women, and they're usually in the startup phase. They're working towards their first $5,000 month, and we work with the strategy and the alchemy, the mindset and the pieces that they need. I'd been in a lot of coaching spaces myself, particularly for startup business, and I found that there were sort of like two camps. It was either like uber masculine, you've got to do this, you've got to
Hmm.
have,
Yep.
all of the highest tech things, you've got to have active campaign, and you've got to have a WordPress website, and you've got to, and it was all money, 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 but it was also very masculine. And then I moved to the other realm, which was all real, sort of like feminine
Yeah.
coaching spaces where there was no structure. And oh, you don't need a website, you don't need, you can just use it on Facebook, just have a Facebook page. And I just felt like I needed to take the best of both worlds
Yeah,
and
for
find a
sure.
spot in the messy middle. And so that's where I see it. I offer people strategies and ways of being from both sides, and all of the sort of foundational things that women in business need to know. And again, I work with women who are just like me. I've created a space online for women who were just like me, and it would have been the kind of place that I would have wanted to hang out when I first started out in coaching and in the online space. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
would
I love
agree
it.
that I've been in the coaching space, not as a coach, but just kind of exploring it when I started my business, and for those first couple of years. And I agree that it's very polarized, right? And
Mm,
I can picture names of different famous coaches in those two camps.
totally.
And I looked when I was looking at your website and reading a bit about you prior to our interview. You do definitely sit in the middle. And what I liked
Mm.
about your site was that I could see a very clear kind of strategy involved, and
Mm.
not just a bunch of fluff, right? I could see that
Oh,
there was a
totally.
strategy there, that there was a plan, and systems in place. But I also love the feel of it. It pulled me in because it is still, in a sense, very feminine too.
Yeah, and I think the thing is there is really women are waking up that there are new ways and other ways that we can be in the world, that we don't
Hmm.
have to be masculine in our
Hmm.
in our jobs, but also if like for those more feminine floaty types that, I was, from where I was sitting, I was really just observing and seeing that so many of those women were ending up with no boundaries. And so there was just like this flood,
Yeah.
just this flood of just energy leaking out of them, and just confusion and overwhelm were just like really common
Yes.
themes, because they just needed, it's not about being super, super structured all the time. That's not the thing. We can recognize that as women, we have cycles, and, our energy ebbs and flows. But we can really work with that to, by just putting some of those masculine structures, so that when we can lean back, we can lean back and recognize. So, I work a lot with women about listening to their intuition, but then also calling themselves out and going, well, is this a story, or is this a genuine intuition telling me and guiding me in this direction? And I think sometimes it's having that level of discernment and that skill to discern, that really can propel a woman in business, or it can make her stop stagnant and not grow, because she's like, oh, but my soul doesn't want to. Well, I don't know about that.
Right. And that
I think
becomes
that's a story. That's what you sold.
That's a story. Yeah. And it becomes transparent very quickly when someone is just putting out, like, speaking of branding, someone can put the branding out there. Okay. They can even suck you into the feels of everything. And then you can think that this person has it all together, and you can work with them for the first 5 minutes and figure out that
there's no substance.
There's no substance. And half the time they don't show up because they've forgotten,
I've experienced,
or they haven't. I have too. I mean, it's
I've experienced that. And that was one of the things that I wanted to push back. I mean, one of my guiding principles is to be the change in the coaching industry.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we have such a terrible reputation in the world, that there are people who, who sort of cowl at the, the coaching industry, and it's because they've been let down, or they've been gaslit,
Exactly.
or they've been, like, oh, well, you, and it's like, well, when you step into this world as a coach, you need to be skilled, and you need to hold people in a way that's transformative. And that means that you do need to have that level of masculine energy to hold that space, because space holding is a masculine energy. But you also, want to have that nurturing sense as well. And, what I notice in the coaching industry, of particularly those sorts of spaces that you're referring to, Carrie, is it's very much about me, my, and I, and what I want. And it's like, where did we lose that sense? And I'll say, this is the one thing that Richard Blissbrook taught me in network marketing, was to be client-centric, to be of service, and to really, honor people, actually honor people, honor their no, honor what they say to you. And really good old-fashioned service. The coaching industry is amazing. Like, when it's done well, it's changed so many lives.
Yeah.
But let's get back to good old-fashioned service, and not that. It's just not. It doesn't honor people. It doesn't respect that people have invested.
Sure.
That's in my opinion.
Even
anyway.
Within the product-based business world, I remember hearing, just focus, and I don't even know who it was that said it at the time, because I probably just discarded it, but hearing, focus on bringing service to people and the money will come. Don't focus on the money. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I'm starting a business and I have to make money. I'm leaving this job. I have to make money. I just couldn't reconcile those two things. But ultimately what happened was, I had this Facebook group, and it wasn't quite working the way I wanted it to, and it wasn't growing. And I was so frustrated with this group, which was seemingly the small part of my business, but it was the thing I couldn't do right. And so that drove me crazy. And last year I finally just said, you know what, I'm taking my sales pretty much out of it. Instead of focusing on selling and having these monthly sales, I want to just serve other women in business. I'm going to do a book club with a lot of like self-help books that I love. I'm a literature teacher. Let's just make it a teacher space. And that's when it started to take off. And that's where the podcast came from. And everything I think falls into place when you put the focus on that. And you know what? Money does come, money does follow when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there is still, like, it's still good to have that strategy behind it, and
Mhm.
it's discovering what works, right, for your
Yeah.
people, and that's exactly what you've done. There's no blueprint, there's no cookie cutter,
No.
but there are definitely things. Success does leave clues, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes it's a matter of trying things on for size for the individual, and for their clientele, because what works for one group of clientele doesn't work for another. And it's just really that sense of experimenting, see what works, measure and test. Be strategic, don't leak energy. That's not what we want to do. We want to make the most of what we do. But being of service is amazing, like creating content that helps people, that adds value, is like that sort of magnetic branding that you were referring to before, where it's like, for me, there's a very, very fine line between magnetism and manipulation in that
Yeah.
space. It's
Mhm.
sort of like, it's all this luscious branding, and it looks all, shop front tizzed up to the nines, but you know we can't have it with nothing behind. So making sure that there's that balance there, having that strategy, having that, delivering for your clients, is just so important, so important. But it's a great space to be in. I do love it. There's just, there's still a lot that I want to change, but I'm determined to do that. It's about being part of the change, and I get it. I'm in a wonderful position to force
Yeah.
change,
Yeah.
because I teach women who are early in their coaching career. So I'm able to call things out and say, hey,
Yes.
like, do you know that that's cultural appropriation? Or, hey, do you know that you need to recognize, country. I mean, we're here in Australia, so we recognize First Nations people. I'm here on the land of the Gumbaynggirr, which was the name of the traditional owners. But this is unceded land, and we need to right wrongs that have been done in the past, whether it was like now, or whether it was our ancestors. So
Mhm.
I get to be in a place where I can educate my clients around that, and also teach them and show them how they can make their spaces more inclusive, more accessible to a wider range of people, not fall into this way of being a coach, that it's all, 5, 10, 20, $100,000 months, where it's
Yeah.
just like, it's not it. Like, that's not it. I don't want to be trapped in that coaches who coach coaches who coach coaches who coach
Yes.
coaches
Yes.
system of money making machines. I'm very specific around who I coach. So I don't coach people who are in that realm. It's like, that's not a good fit. It needs to be people who are grassroots coaches, who are people who just want to affect change in their local communities and in their online spaces that they hang out in.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I'm anxious to see where you go with it. And I think there is almost a new generation of coaches coming up, from what I have noticed, that share similar values to you. So
Mm,
hopefully we will see a lot of change in the coaching industry. So one thing I
I hope
ask
so.
everyone is, it's a two-pronged question. What has been your greatest challenge getting you to where you are now? And then on the flip side of that, what has been your greatest joy?
Greatest challenge to where I am now. Look, I think, to be honest, being a solopreneur, and not having a community of people initially who were not business owners or entrepreneurs, that's probably been the biggest challenge. So I had to be quite radical in changing my circle in order to be
Yeah.
and learn. And so I kind of, you really have to put yourself out there in order to do that. And there's ways to do it, even for people who are, more introverted. I'm an ambivert. I'm a little bit of both. So I think that's probably been the hardest thing, is just you know, getting like literally recreating a circle of people who, you know, you can have in your corner, and just make sure that you know that you can reach out to people. So that would probably be the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Biggest joy, look, it'd definitely be, you know, I mean, there's been so many things, like obviously our lap of Australia and our move to the coastal area where we are, which is a smaller regional area, was, you know, that was life changing, and it was huge. Like, no regrets, absolute best thing we've ever done. But closely followed by, you know, changing careers. Like, I really, really believe, I mean, I'm interested in human design, and the more that I look at my human design, the more that I'm just like, wow, like I was always going to be doing this.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible how much my human design chart says about me in this job, and my more like hidden talents that I can't actually quite explain in words. My chart explains it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say my biggest joy would, you know, like I just love what I do. I love what I do. It's more like, it feels more like a passion project than a job.
So probably like me, you love Mondays now. I used to hate Mondays. I love Mondays. Monday's it's one of my favorite days of the week now.
It is, yeah. Well, I call Mondays my biz Monday, and that's where I
Yeah.
work on my business, not in it.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesdays are great days because I work with clients, and Wednesdays, and then Thursdays I work in my membership, which is like just the best place on the internet. It's the
Uh-huh.
place that I just absolutely delight in, and I think that takes me back to my roots as a teacher, because that one to many, I love working with people one to one, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, I feel so at home working one to many. You know, it's
Yeah.
that teaching, and you know, I've been in other coaching spaces, and people who aren't teachers can't be talking to one person and yet teaching a whole group
Mm-hmm.
like a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
you know,
hear
I
you.
had, and this is what clients tell me. They're like, how do you do it? Like, how is it that you're talking to that person, but it's like you're talking to me and guiding me? And it's like, well, I am, you know, I'm speaking for the room.
Yeah.
But you know, I love that. So it's a great thing. I just love what I do.
So do you have any, I listen to a lot of podcasts and obviously, and I love books, as you can see
Yeah.
behind me. Do you have any book recommendations or podcast recommendations for women who
Yeah.
are thinking of starting something really new in their lives, maybe making some kind of a radical change, but they're kind of locked into that fear space right now?
Yeah. Well, I have ADHD, so reading physical books is just like, I don't even think there's very few books I've actually gotten through from cover to cover in my whole
Mm-hmm.
entire life, but I love an audiobook. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely audiobooks are my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and I've listened to a lot of those. And I thought about this question, you know, I think personal development books are a great place to start. And probably some of the more cliche, if for people who are just starting out on this journey, some of the more cliche type books that people talk about are probably really great starting points. So, you know, some of the first ones that I listened to was some Rachel Hollis. Now, I probably wouldn't recommend her books quite so much these days.
You're right. I
But you
did
know,
too,
this is
though.
a few years ago, and
Yeah.
I still think that you know, there's a really great message in them.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, her books, Untamed by Glennon Doyle, is
Yep.
always such a great book. Anything from Brene Brown,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Mel Robbins, like they're
Mm-hmm.
really great books. But I also love the work of Joe Dispenza,
Yeah, I was just talking about
particularly.
his work the other day.
Yeah, I like the work of Joe Dispenza. So particularly the one about you know, changing the habit of being you, or something
Mm-hmm.
to that effect. I think that's a great book. I do have this one, Atomic Habits by
Yeah,
James Clear.
we're doing that one right
Game
now in
changer.
that's my Facebook group
Game
book
changer.
of the month. Yeah, we're talking
Yeah,
about
well,
that.
this is a very central book in my membership. So
Yeah,
I do recommend this book. And I find it easy to read. It's
it's
actually
very
one that I
easy to
find easy to
read.
read.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one would be Richard's book, Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire,
Mm,
MACH numeral 2, Mach 2 with Your Hair on Fire, which, I've probably listened to that book no less than 10 times. It goes for about 3 hours on an audiobook, and I've just listened to it over and over and over. And then it is the easiest personal development book anybody could ever consume. It's very, very small. I've got it here on my side table. It's very small, but it is just such a great book. It's about the art of vision and self-motivation,
mm.
actually, the link between having a clear vision and the motivation that that brings. And look, it's manifestation as its most simplest form. It doesn't get
Okay.
any easier. I mean, for people just starting out, like,
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza's work is bloody heavy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Right.
like really heavy. But if you just want something really easy, Richard Bliss Brooks' book is just, it's a great start. I've not ever shared it with anybody who hasn't gone, that book was amazing. And that's even people who have been in personal development spaces. So
Nice. All right. Well, you've given us a lot of suggestions here, and I agree with a lot of those. Now, this one, I'm going to have to check out. And I just got an Audible subscription recently because I
fantastic.
always read physical books, even though I listen to podcasts when I'm out walking. But I thought, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm listening to so many of these, and I listen to so many. I feel like I just burned through them all. So I
Yeah.
figured it's time for some books as well. It'll take me a little longer to get through them, so we'll do that.
Yeah, I love listening to, I mean, sometimes podcasts or audiobooks, particularly in the car. So I'll have it
Yeah, in the
ready and,
car I do
you
too.
know, yeah, it's always good
Yeah.
to consume, and I think that's the thing, is when your business becomes such a passion, you sort of use every moment that you can to be learning. Or I'll listen to
Yes.
podcasts and things in the shower, and
Hmm.
just absorb little bite-sized morsels that I can just digest. It's great.
Yeah, I actually had to, before we end here, I was driving to North Carolina with my mother, and my mother is she's just a very hilarious person, but also really stubborn. And we were driving down. She's been divorced from my father for I don't even know how many years. And I keep telling her she needs to change her energy field, open herself to love, listen once in a while, and start listening to podcasts and read some books. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do it. So I had her in the car for 5 hours, and she had forced books and podcasts on there. And she loved it by the time she was finished, but it was like my time to
Yeah.
finally educate. It was great. Okay, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna
well, I do a similar thing with my teenage daughter. It's
ah
definitely a strategy that works. She knows if she's on a long haul drive with me
yes,
somewhere, that she's going to be having some sort of a podcast or
right.
audiobook in her ears that's going to be transformational.
Yeah, my boys get a little bit of it too. They roll their eyes, but they can't do anything about it, right?
That's it.
So I'm going to end here. We've had a great interview, but we've come to the end of the time here. So I do want to ask you before we leave, how can people find
Mm.
you online if maybe they would like to connect with you or learn more about you?
Yeah, I'd love to connect with your listeners. So I hang out mostly on Instagram. I am on Facebook, but I hang out on Instagram at Sharon Joy Coaching, all one word. And yeah, if people would like to get my free branding masterclass, then they can get that via my website at sharonjoycoaching.com. Or yeah, just connect with me. I'd love to hear from your listeners if they had any great takeaways. Yeah, jump in my DMs on Insta.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. It has been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.